The station called Thalvarus Prime floated at the edge of a dying nebula, far from any world that could claim it. It was the largest structure ever built by living hands, a city of metal and light, home to no one and open to everyone. Every 10 cycles, the great species of the galaxy gathered here to settle their disputes, not with words, not with treaties, with blood. They called it the Arena of Worlds. Princess Violara Soketh arrived on the 3rd day of the summit, aboard a warship that gleamed like a fallen star. She was tall, even by the standards of her people, the Ilvari. Her skin held the pale violet shade of deep space orchids, and her eyes burned with a soft golden light, the mark of a powerful psychic mind. 2 curved horns, delicate as glass, rose from her temples and swept back through silver hair that moved as if touched by a wind no one else could feel. She was the heir to the Ilvari Dominion, the oldest and most feared civilization in the known galaxy. Her people had ruled the psychic arts for longer than most species had existed. They could shatter minds with a thought, move objects with a glance, and read the emotions of any living creature within 1,000 paces. In the Arena of Worlds, they had never lost. Not once. Not in 12,000 years. Violara walked through the station's grand corridors with her head high and her hands folded behind her back. Delegations from 100 worlds stepped aside as she passed. The insectoid Vreth clicked their mandibles in respect. The massive, stone-skinned Gorath lowered their horned heads. Even the cold-blooded syndicate merchants paused their deals to watch her go. She paid them no attention. Her mind was already on the arena. A territorial dispute had brought her here. The Ilvari Dominion had claimed a colony world called Verath, rich in rare minerals, sitting at the junction of 3 hyperspace lanes. The problem was that someone else had already settled there. A young species, a small species, a species so unremarkable that most galactic records barely mentioned them. Humans. Violara had read the files on the journey here. Humans came from a single world called Earth, a wet rock orbiting a yellow star in an unimportant arm of the galaxy. They had no psychic abilities, no natural armor, no venom, no claws, no wings. They lived short lives, barely a century, and spent most of that time arguing with each other. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel in the last 200 years, a blink of an eye by galactic standards. The Ilvari had offered them a chance to leave Verath peacefully. The humans had refused. When the Dominion pressed harder, the Terran Systems Alliance had done something that surprised everyone. They had invoked the right of combat, the ancient law of the conquered that allowed any species to settle a dispute through a champion fight in the arena. Violara had laughed when she heard the news. Her advisor, an old Ilvari named Thalros, had laughed too. "They are either very brave or very stupid," Thalros had said. "There is no difference," Violara had replied. Now she sat in the royal viewing gallery, high above the arena floor. The gallery was enclosed in crystal that amplified psychic senses, allowing the Ilvari to feel every emotion on the battlefield below. Thousands of spectators filled the tiers around the arena, a vast oval of white stone, lit by floating orbs that cast no shadows. The air hummed with energy. Cameras drifted overhead, broadcasting to 100 star systems. The Ilvari champion entered first. Lord Kaelan was everything a warrior should be. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body wrapped in living crystal armor that grew from his own bones, a gift given only to the greatest Ilvari fighters. The armor shifted and pulsed with inner light, responding to his thoughts. In his hand, he carried a blade of condensed psychic energy, a weapon that could cut through starship hull plating. He had killed 43 champions in this arena. He had never been wounded. The crowd roared as he raised his blade. Violara felt the wave of admiration and fear wash through the gallery. She smiled. This would be quick. Then the announcer called the human champion. The gate on the opposite side of the arena opened. For a long moment, nothing happened. The crowd grew quiet. Violara leaned forward in her seat, her golden eyes narrowing. A man walked out. He was not tall. He was not wrapped in armor that glowed with power. He wore simple combat fatigues, dark fabric, scarred boots, a belt with a single blade hanging from it. His skin was brown and weathered, marked with dozens of scars that told stories she could not read. His dark hair was cut short. His jaw was set like stone. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Captain Jace Morrow looked up at the arena as if he had seen 1,000 arenas before and found none of them impressive. His gaze swept across the roaring crowd, across the floating cameras, across the impossible size of Lord Kaelin, and showed nothing. No fear, no excitement, no doubt. Violara reached out with her psychic senses, the way she always did before a match. She liked to taste the emotions of both fighters, the confidence of her champion, the terror of the opponent. It was her favorite part. She touched Kaelin's mind first, calm, controlled, ready, good. Then she reached for the human. Her breath caught in her throat. She had expected fear. She had expected the bright, sharp taste of a creature that knew it was about to die. Instead, she found something she had never encountered in her life. The human's mind was not empty. It was not shielded. It was simply dense, like trying to push her hand through a wall of compressed iron. Every thought, every memory, every emotion was packed so tightly together that her psychic touch could find no gap, no weakness, no way inside. And beneath that wall, she felt something burning. Not rage exactly, not madness, something older and heavier. Something that had been carried for a very long time and had only grown stronger under the weight. She pulled her senses back as if she had touched a hot flame. "Thalrose," she whispered. Her advisor leaned close. "Yes, princess." "What is he?" Thalrose frowned. "A human, princess, nothing more." Down on the arena floor, Jace Morrow drew his blade. It was a simple thing, a monomolecular edge, no longer than his forearm. Against the blazing psychic sword of Lord Kaelin, it looked like a toy. The horn sounded, the match began. And Violara, for the first time in her life, felt afraid of the answer she might find. Lord Kaelin did not wait. The moment the horn faded, he raised his open hand toward the human and unleashed the shattering, the most feared psychic attack in the known galaxy. It was not a blow to the body. It was a blow to the mind itself, a wave of pure psychic force designed to tear apart a conscious being's sense of self, to break the connections between thought and memory, between will and action. Warriors from a dozen species had fallen to it without Kaelin taking a single step. The Vreth champion had collapsed screaming. The Goreth fighter had dropped to his knees and wept like a child. The wave hit Jace Morrow like a wall of invisible fire. He staggered. His left knee buckled, and for one terrible second it looked like he would fall. Blood ran from his nose in a thin red line. His eyes squeezed shut. His jaw clenched so hard that the muscles in his neck stood out like cables. The crowd held its breath. Then he opened his eyes. He was still standing. A sound moved through the arena, not a cheer, not a gasp, but something deeper. A ripple of disbelief that passed from species to species like a cold wind. In 12,000 years, no Nanovari had ever remained standing after the shattering. It was supposed to be impossible. High in the royal gallery, Violara gripped the armrests of her chair so hard that the crystal cracked beneath her fingers. She did not notice. Her psychic senses were locked onto the human below, and what she saw there made her blood turn cold. He was not resisting the attack. That was the part she could not understand. A strong mind could build walls, could push back against psychic intrusion, but the human was not pushing back. He was doing something far worse. He was taking the pain, all of it, every wave of agony that Kaelin threw at him, and his body was turning it into something else. His heart rate climbed. His muscles tightened. His pupils shrank to black dots. A chemical fire was spreading through his blood. Something primitive, something that belonged to a world where every day was a fight for survival. The pain was not breaking him, it was waking him up. Kaelin felt the failure of his psychic assault, and for the first time showed a flicker of surprise. He recovered quickly and charged forward, bringing his blazing sword down in a strike that could have split a ground vehicle in two. Jace moved. He was not fast in the way the Elvari were fast. He did not flow like water or glide like wind. He moved like a creature that had learned to dodge by getting hit 1,000 times, ugly, efficient, and just enough. Kalen's blade cut the air where Jace had been a heartbeat before, and the human rolled sideways across the stone floor, coming up with his monomolecular blade held low. Kalen pressed the attack. He was bigger, stronger, and faster. His crystal armor absorbed the few strikes Jace managed to land, and his psychic sword left burning cuts across the human's arms and ribs. Blood soaked through the dark fabric of Jace's fatigues. He was thrown back once, twice, 3 times. Each time he hit the ground hard enough to crack the stone beneath him. Each time he got back up. Violara watched with her lips parted. She had seen warriors fight through injury before. The Gorath could ignore wounds that would kill lesser beings. The insectoid Vreth felt no pain at all, but this was different. The human clearly felt every cut, every impact, every burn. His face twisted with pain. His breath came in ragged gasps. He was suffering, and he kept fighting anyway. That was the thing she could not look away from. Not his skill, not his speed, not his blade. His refusal. His absolute, irrational, terrifying refusal to stop. On the arena floor, Kalen was growing frustrated. He had expected this to be finished in seconds. Instead, the human was still moving, still circling, still watching with those dark, calculating eyes. And Kalen began to notice something troubling. The human's movements were changing. In the first minute, Jace had been reacting, dodging, retreating, surviving. But now, 3 minutes in, something had shifted. The human was not just dodging, he was reading. Every time Kalen swung, Jace watched the angle of his shoulders, the position of his feet, the way the crystal armor moved at the joints. He was mapping the Elvari warrior like a puzzle to be solved. Kalen launched a wide horizontal strike, designed to cut the human in half at the waist. Jace ducked under it and for the first time attacked with intent. His monomolecular blade flashed toward a gap between the crystal plates at Kalen's hip. The blade connected. It did not cut deep. The crystal was too thick, but it drew a thin line of violet blood. The crowd erupted. Kalen roared more from anger than pain and doubled his assault. He hammered at the human with a fury that shook the arena floor. Jace took hits. A slash opened his left arm from elbow to wrist. A kick sent him sliding across the stone on his back. A psychic pulse drove him to one knee. But he had learned enough. The next time Kalen thrust his psychic blade forward, aiming for the human's chest, Jace did not dodge. He did not block. He stepped into the blow. The blade punched through his right shoulder, burning through muscle and bone, and the human screamed, a raw, animal sound that echoed off the arena walls. Then he clamped his left hand around Kalen's wrist and held on. The Elvari champion tried to pull free. He could not. The human's grip was locked, his fingers driven by something beyond normal strength, adrenaline, fury, the desperate power of a creature that had decided this was the moment. With his right arm hanging useless, Jace drew his monomolecular blade with his left hand, flipped it into a reverse grip, and drove it into the one place on Kalen's armor that mattered, the neural seam, a thin line at the base of the neck where the living crystal connected to the warrior's nervous system. Every Elvari knew it was a weakness. No opponent had ever gotten close enough to exploit it. The blade sank in. Kalen's eyes went wide. The crystal armor flickered, dimmed, and went dark. His legs gave way beneath him, and he fell to the arena floor like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The psychic blade vanished. The silence that followed was louder than any roar. Jace Morrow stood over the fallen champion. Blood ran down both his arms and dripped from his fingers onto the white stone. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. His right shoulder was ruined. His body swayed like a tree about to fall. But he was standing. Slowly he raised his head. His gaze climbed the tiers of the arena, past the stunned crowds, past the cameras that had stopped moving, past the diplomats who had forgotten how to speak. His eyes found the royal gallery. They found the crystal window. They found her. Violara stared back at him. For one impossible moment, her psychic gift broke through the wall of his mind, not far, not deep, but enough. She saw flashes. A burning colony under a red sky. A boy carrying his sister through rubble. Years of training, fighting, losing, burying friends in unmarked graves. Pain layered on pain, compressed into something harder than diamond. And at the center of it all, one single thought, steady as a heartbeat: I am still here. Violara pulled back from his mind. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were wet, and she did not know why. Down in the arena, Jace Morrow's legs finally gave out. He fell to his knees beside the unconscious Kaelan, his blade clattering from his hand. Medical teams rushed from both sides. The crowd still had not made a sound. Thalrose, her advisor, sat frozen beside her. His face was pale. His mouth opened and closed several times before words came out. "That is not possible," he said. Violara said nothing. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and stared down at the broken, bleeding human being carried from the arena floor on a stretcher. She had come here expecting to watch a lesser creature die. Instead, she had seen something that would keep her awake for a very long time. Humans were not what the galaxy believed them to be. They were not weak. They were not soft. They were something else entirely, something the Ilvari had never needed to be, because they had never suffered enough to become it. They were unbreakable. And her people had just made enemies of them. The Ilvari court was in chaos. Violara could feel it before she even reached the council chamber, a storm of emotions pressing against her psychic senses like heat from an open furnace. Anger, shame, disbelief, and beneath all of it, something that the Ilvari had not felt in 12,000 years of galactic dominance. Fear. The council chamber sat deep inside the Ilvari flagship, a circular room of dark crystal and pale light. 12 seats ringed a central platform, and on the tallest seat, carved from a single piece of living crystal that pulsed with the rhythm of his heartbeat, sat Sovereign Malachar Soketh. Violara's father was old, even by Ilvari standards. His horns had grown long and curved, their tips sharp as daggers. His skin had deepened from violet to near black, and his golden eyes burned with a cold, steady fire that had never dimmed. He had ruled the Dominion for 3 centuries, and in all that time he had never lost control of anything. He was not in control now. "This is an insult," said General Vorath, slamming his fist against the arm of his chair. The crystal cracked beneath the blow. "A primitive creature from a dirt world has humiliated us in front of the entire galaxy. Every species that ever bowed to us watched that fight. They watched our champion fall to a creature with no gifts, no armor, and a blade the length of my forearm." "Lord Kaelan will recover," said Councillor Miving, the only calm voice in the room. "His pride is wounded more than his body." "His pride is our pride," Vorath snapped, "and it is shattered." Violara stood near the entrance, watching and listening. She had not been invited to speak. Daughters of the Sovereign were expected to observe, learn, and stay silent until their opinion was requested. Her opinion had never been requested. Sovereign Malachar raised one hand, and the room fell silent. His voice was low, the kind of quiet that forced everyone to lean in. "The Human Alliance has won the arena challenge. By the laws of the conquered, Vareth belongs to them." He paused. "I do not accept this." General Vorath's lips curved into a satisfied smile. "Then we take it." "The conquered will oppose us," Councillor Miving warned. "The conquered is a collection of cowards who hide behind ritual," Vorath said. "None of them will stand against the Dominion's fleet. We move on Varath, we remove the human colony, and we remind the galaxy why the Ilvari have ruled for 12 millennia." The council members murmured in agreement. Violara felt her stomach turn. She had watched the fight. She had touched the human's mind. These old men had done neither, and they were ready to start a war based on wounded pride. She could not stay silent. "Father." Every head turned. Malachar's golden eyes settled on her. There was no warmth in them. "You wish to speak, daughter?" "I do." She stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back to hide the fact that they were trembling. "I was in the viewing gallery. I used my gift to study the human warrior during the fight. What I found concerns me deeply." General Vorath let out a short, dismissive breath. "Concerns? A princess has concerns. How useful." Violara ignored him. She kept her eyes on her father. The human did not resist Lord Kaelin's psychic attack. He absorbed it. His body converted the pain into chemical energy, adrenaline, cortisol, a cascade of survival responses that made him faster, stronger, and more focused. Our greatest weapon did not weaken him. It fueled him. The room was quiet. "If one human can do this," she continued, "then all of them can. It is not a skill. It is their biology. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day, and instead of developing gifts like ours, they developed the ability to turn suffering into strength. If we go to war against a species like that, we will not be facing an army. We will be facing billions of creatures that get more dangerous the harder we hit them." General Vorath stood, his crystal armor catching the light. "You speak as if you admire them." "I speak as if I understand them. There is a difference." "Enough," said Malachar. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Your observations are noted, Violara. You may go." She had been dismissed. She bowed her head, turned, and walked out of the council chamber with her back straight and her jaw tight. She knew what would happen. Vorath would get his war. Her father would let him have it. And the galaxy would burn because proud old men could not accept that something small and soft and short-lived had beaten them. She went to the intelligence archives. The Elvari flagship carried the most complete records in the galaxy, thousands of years of data on every known species, gathered through psychic espionage, diplomatic observation, and outright spying. Violara locked herself in a private terminal room and searched for everything the Dominion had on humanity. What she found kept her reading for 6 hours straight. Humans had been killing each other since before they could write. Their history was a record of war after war after war, fought over land, over ideas, over resources, over things as abstract as pride and honor. They had invented weapons that could crack open their own planet, and they had used them. They had poisoned their air and their water, driven countless other species on their world to extinction, and nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times over. And every single time they had survived, they had rebuilt, they had come back stronger. But it was the smaller stories that shook her most. A human city burned to the ground in a great fire, and its people rebuilt it in 10 years, bigger than before. A human nation was conquered and occupied for a century, and its language, its culture, its identity survived underground until the day it rose again. A human being could lose a limb, a home, a family, and still wake up the next morning and choose to keep living. They did not have the power to shatter minds. They did not have armor that grew from their bones. They did not have any of the gifts that the galaxy considered necessary for survival. Instead, they had something else, something that no database could properly measure or explain. They simply refused to stay down. Violara closed the terminal and sat in the dark for a long time. She thought about the man in the arena, Captain Jace Morrow. She thought about the moment their eyes had met, and the flash of memory she had pulled from his mind, the burning colony, the boy with his sister, the years of grief compressed into iron will. She made a decision. It took her 3 hours to find the right communication channel, a back door through the Concord's diplomatic network that could not be traced to the Elvari flagship. She routed her signal through 4 relay stations and 2 dead systems, and she sent a single encrypted message to the Terran delegation's quarters on Thalvaris Prime. The message was short, I wish to speak with your champion, privately. There are things he needs to know." She waited. She did not expect a response. Humans had no reason to trust an Ilvari princess, especially one whose father was about to invade their colony. The response came in 11 minutes. It was even shorter than her message. "Name the place." 2 hours later, Violara stood alone in a neutral observation lounge on the far side of Thalvaris Prime. The room was small and quiet, with a single curved window that looked out over the dying nebula. The colors were beautiful, deep reds and fading golds, the last breath of a star that had burned out long ago. The door opened, and Jace Mara walked in. He looked terrible. His right arm was in a medical sling, wrapped in regeneration patches that glowed faintly blue. His face was pale, and dark circles sat beneath his eyes. He moved carefully, like a man who knew exactly where every wound was and how much it would hurt if he moved wrong. But his eyes were the same, steady, watchful, unbroken. They looked at each other across the small room. Two people from opposite sides of a war that had not yet started, but was already inevitable. "You wanted to talk," Jace said. His voice was rough, tired, and completely without fear. "Yes," Violara said. She searched for the right words. In her language, there were 1,000 ways to say what she needed to say, elegant phrases, poetic structures, layers of meaning wrapped in beauty. But she was not speaking to an Ilvari. She was speaking to a human, so she chose the simplest words she could find. "Your colony is in danger. My father is bringing the war fleet, and he has a weapon that could kill every human on Verath in minutes." She paused. "I am here because I believe that would be wrong." Jay studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a chair, lowered himself into it with a wince, and said, "Then sit down and tell me everything." Violara told him everything. She told him about the psychic resonance weapon, a device built during the Ilvari's ancient wars, designed to send a wave of psychic energy across an entire planet's surface. It would not destroy buildings or burn forests. It would reach into the mind of every non-psychic being on the world and shatter the connections between their neurons. Death would come in seconds. Painless, perhaps, but absolute. It had never been used. Even the Ilvari, in all their centuries of conquest, had considered it too monstrous. It had sat locked in a vault beneath the flagship for 3,000 years, waiting for a day when pride finally outweighed conscience. That day had come. Jace listened without interrupting. His face showed nothing while she spoke, no shock, no anger, no panic. When she finished, he sat in silence for a long time, staring out the observation window at the fading nebula. "How long before the fleet reaches Verath?" he asked. 6 days. "And the weapon, how close does the ship need to be to use it?" "Within the planet's gravitational field. The resonance wave uses the planet's own magnetic structure to spread. Once it is in orbit, activation takes less than a minute." Jace nodded slowly. He asked her technical questions, the weapon's power source, its range, its vulnerabilities. Violara answered everything she knew. She had pulled the schematics from the flagship's classified archives before coming here, burning through 3 levels of security clearance that she was never supposed to access. If her father found out, it would be considered high treason. The punishment for that was death, even for a princess. She did not care. She had seen what was in the human's mind during the arena fight. She had read 6 hours of human history. She understood something that her father and General Vorath did not, that destroying the humans on Verath would not end the conflict. It would begin a war that the Ilvari could not win. Humans did not forget. They did not forgive. And they did not stop. "I need to transmit this to my people," Jace said, finally looking at her. "The fleet positions, the approach vector, the weapon specifications, everything." "I know." She pulled a small crystal from inside her sleeve, an Ilvari data chip, glowing faintly with compressed information. "It is all here, encrypted in a format your systems can read." He took it from her hand. Their fingers touched for a brief moment, and Violara felt a spark of something through her psychic senses. Not a thought, not a memory, but a feeling. Gratitude mixed with something harder. Determination. "Why are you doing this?" Jace asked quietly. She considered lying. She could have said it was political calculation, a move to position herself for power after her father fell. She could have said it was strategy. A way to prevent a war the Elvari would regret. Both of those things were partly true. But she had chosen to deal honestly with this human, and she would not stop now. "Because in the arena, when I looked into your mind, I saw what you are," she said. "Not just you, your species. You carry your suffering with you, and it makes you strong. My people have never had to do that. We were born powerful. We have never known what it means to be weak, to be broken, to have to build ourselves back from nothing." She paused. "I think that is why we are so afraid of you, and I think my father would rather destroy your colony than face that fear." Jay studied her for a long moment. Then he said something that she did not expect. "You know that once I send this, there is no going back for you. If they find out what you did, your own people will call you a traitor." "Yes. Are you ready for that?" She met his eyes. Are humans ever ready for the things they endure? A ghost of a smile crossed his face, the first she had seen from him. "No," he said, "we just do them anyway." He stood, tucked the data chip into his sling, and walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back. "Thank you, Princess." "Violara," she said, "if I am going to betray my civilization for you, you should at least use my name." He nodded once. "Violara, stay safe." Then he was gone. Jace made it back to the Terran delegation's quarters in 20 minutes, his wounds screaming with every step. The delegation was small, 12 diplomats, a security detail of 8 Marines, and Admiral Chen Wei, the sharp-eyed woman who commanded the Terran Alliance's outer fleet. They had been assigned a block of modest rooms on the station's lower levels, far from the grand suites given to the major powers. Nobody had expected them to need anything more. Jace found Admiral Chen in the Situation Room, a converted storage space with folding tables and borrowed screens. He closed the door, placed the Elvari data chip on the table, and told her everything. Chen listened the way good commanders listen, without expression, without interruption, with eyes that missed nothing. When Jace finished, she picked up the chip and turned it over in her fingers. "You trust her," Chen said. "It was not a question." "Yes." "Why?" "Because she touched my mind during the fight. I felt it. She saw what I am, and it changed something in her. She is not doing this for advantage. She is doing this because she believes it is right." Chen looked at him for a long time. Jace knew what she was thinking. This could be a trap. The Elvari were master manipulators. A princess offering secret intelligence was exactly the kind of operation they would run to lure a young species into a prepared kill zone. "If it is a trap," Jace said, reading her silence, "we die on Verath either way. The weapon she described, if it is real, and if they use it, the colony is gone. 200,000 people are people. And if we act on this intelligence and it is real, we have a chance. A small one." Chen set the chip down and activated the decryption. The schematics unfolded across the screen: the weapon, the fleet formation, the approach vector, the timeline. Everything matched what little the Terran intelligence services had been able to gather independently. The details were too specific, too precise, too technically accurate to be fabrication. 6 days, Chen said quietly. 6 days. She turned to the communications officer in the corner. "Get me a priority channel to Fleet Command, maximum encryption. Tell them we need every ship we have at Verath in 5 days." She paused, then added, "And tell them to bring the Blackwall protocols." The room went very still. Jace knew about the Blackwall protocols. Every soldier did. They were humanity's last resort defensive doctrine, a set of tactics designed for situations where survival was unlikely and surrender was not an option. They had never been activated outside of simulations. "Admiral," Jay said carefully, "the Blackwall protocols assume we cannot win." "We probably cannot," Chen said, meeting his eyes. "They outnumber us 5-1, and their fleet has technology we cannot match. But we do not need to win, Captain. We need to stop that weapon from reaching orbit. We need to buy time for evacuation if we fail. And we need to make them pay enough that they never try this again." She looked back at the schematics on the screen, the weapon ship at the center of the Elvari formation, surrounded by a wall of warships. "Your princess gave us their formation. She gave us the weapon's exact position. That means we know where to hit." Chen allowed herself a thin smile. "The Elvari have never fought an enemy who knew they were coming. Let us see how they handle a surprise." Over the next 5 days, the Terran Alliance moved with a speed that stunned even its own commanders. Ships were pulled from patrol routes across 3 sectors. Reservists were called up. Civilian transports were repurposed as emergency evacuation vessels and sent to Verath to begin moving the colony's most vulnerable populations. And in a classified shipyard orbiting Mars, 3 stealth destroyers were loaded with specialized warheads designed to disrupt psychic energy fields, experimental technology that had never been tested in combat. The engineers called them mindbreakers. The admirals called them a long shot. The soldiers who would carry them called them their only hope. On the Elvari flagship, Violara went about her days as if nothing had changed. She attended council meetings. She listened to General Vorath boast about the coming campaign. She watched her father study fleet deployments with cold, calculating eyes. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. She spoke when she was expected to speak. And every night, alone in her quarters, she stared at the stars and wondered if she had just saved a world or destroyed her own. On the 6th day, the Elvari fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Verath system. 47 warships, arranged in a perfect crescent formation. At the center, slightly behind the line, sat the weapon ship, a massive, ancient vessel that had been pulled from its vault and reactivated for the first time in 3,000 years. Violara stood on the flagship's observation deck and watched the blue-green planet grow larger in the viewport. Verath, 200,000 human lives, families, children, people who had never held a weapon and never wanted to. The weapon ship began its approach to orbit. The resonance core hummed to life, sending vibrations through the fleet that every Elvari could feel in their bones. Sovereign Malachar gave the order, "Begin charging sequence." Violara closed her eyes. Then the alarms went off. Every screen on the flagship lit up with warning signals. The sensor officer's voice cracked as he reported what the instruments were showing. A fleet had appeared, not in front of the Elvari formation, where they had been expected, but behind it, directly behind the weapon ship, in a blind spot that should have been impossible to find without exact knowledge of the fleet's positioning. The Terran Alliance fleet, 23 ships, smaller, fewer, outgunned. But in exactly the right place. Sovereign Malachar turned from the viewport. His golden eyes found his daughter across the observation deck. She met his gaze without flinching, without apology, without regret. "What have you done?" he whispered. Violara lifted her chin. What was necessary? The Battle of Verath began with fire and ended with silence. The Terran fleet hit the weapon ship before the Elvari could reposition. 3 stealth destroyers, the ones carrying the experimental mindbreaker warheads, fired first. The warheads crossed the gap between the fleets in seconds, trailing blue-white light like falling stars. They struck the weapon ship's psychic shielding and detonated in a cascade of disruption energy that sent shockwaves rippling through every Elvari mind within 1,000 kilometers. The effect lasted only moments, but it was enough. For the first time in their lives, the Elvari crews experienced what it felt like to have their psychic senses scrambled, a few seconds of blindness, confusion, and vulnerability. It was a taste of what they had planned to inflict on an entire planet. In those precious seconds, the Terran fleet struck hard. Admiral Chen had positioned her ships with surgical precision, using every detail from Violara's intelligence. The main battle group engaged the Elvari crescent from behind, forcing them to turn and regroup. Meanwhile, a fast attack wing of 6 frigates punched through the confusion around the weapon ship and opened fire on its engines. The Elvari recovered quickly. They were the greatest naval force in the galaxy for good reason. Within minutes, their fleet had reformed, their psychic coordination restored, and their superior firepower began to tell. Terran ships started taking hits. The destroyer Avalon lost its port side to a focused energy lance. The cruiser Endeavour was crippled by a psychic pulse that shorted every electronic system on board. The frigate Kestrel broke apart under concentrated fire, its crew lost in a flash of expanding light and debris. But the humans did not retreat. Every Elvari officer who had studied human military history knew this in theory. They knew that humans fought hardest when the odds were worst. They knew that human ships would not surrender, that human crews would keep firing from crippled vessels, that human captains would ram their burning ships into enemy formations rather than pull back. They knew all of this from files and reports and intelligence briefings. Knowing it and seeing it were very different things. The cruiser Ironclad, its hull torn open and its crew breathing through emergency masks, turned into the path of 3 Elvari warships and detonated its reactor core. The explosion consumed all 3. The frigate Sparrow, engines destroyed and drifting, continued to fire its remaining weapons at the weapon ship until the last member of its crew was dead. A boarding shuttle, barely larger than a cargo pod, launched from the carrier Relentless and flew straight into the weapon ship's damaged hangar bay, carrying 24 Marines who knew they were unlikely to come back. Jace Morrow was on that shuttle. His shoulder was still healing. The medical team had told him he was unfit for combat. Admiral Chen had ordered him to stay behind. He had ignored both of them. He had walked to the shuttle bay, picked up a rifle with his good hand, and looked at the Marines waiting there. "That weapon kills 200,000 people if it fires," he had said. "I need volunteers who are comfortable with the possibility that stopping it might kill us instead." All 24 had stood up. The shuttle hit the weapon ship's hangar hard, skidding across the deck in a shower of sparks. The Marines poured out into the corridors of the ancient vessel, and the close quarters fighting began. Elvari warriors met them at every junction. The corridors were narrow, twisting, and built for beings with psychic senses. The humans were fighting blind in a maze designed by minds that could see around corners. Psychic attacks hammered them constantly. Soldiers stumbled. Soldiers bled from their eyes and ears. Soldiers screamed as phantom pain tore through their nervous systems. They kept moving. Jace led from the front because that was the only way he knew how to lead. He could not match the Elvari in speed or strength. His injured shoulder meant he could barely hold his rifle steady. But he had been fighting since he was 16 years old, and he knew something that no amount of psychic power could teach: how to keep going when your body begged you to stop. They fought through 4 decks of resistance. They lost 9 Marines. The corridors behind them were marked with blood from both species, red and violet, mixing on the ancient metal floors. When they finally reached the weapons control chamber, the resonance core was already glowing. The charging sequence was at 80%. In minutes, it would be ready to fire. The chamber was vast, a cathedral of dark crystal and humming energy, built around a central pillar of light that pulsed like a living heart. Elvari technicians worked frantically at control stations around the core, and a squad of elite guards stood ready at the entrance. The Marines hit them like a wave. The fighting was brutal and close. Rifles gave way to sidearms, then to blades, then to fists. Jace took a psychic blast that dropped him to one knee and a crystal blade that opened a gash across his ribs. He got back up. He always got back up. Then the far door of the chamber opened, and Violara walked in. She had been confined to quarters on the flagship after her father's accusation. She had used her psychic abilities to disable the guards outside her door, something she had never done to her own people before. She had stolen a shuttle under the cover of the battle's chaos, flown through crossfire that had nearly killed her twice, and docked with the weapon ship through a maintenance port that only the royal family knew existed. She had come because this weapon was her people's sin, and she would not let someone else pay for it. She and Jace faced each other across the glowing chamber, the princess and the warrior, standing on opposite sides of the resonance core. Around them, the fighting had stopped. The surviving Elvari guards stared at their princess in shock. The human marines kept their weapons raised but held their fire. "Together," Jace said. Violera nodded. "Together." She moved to the primary control station and began the shutdown sequence. Her fingers flew across the crystal interface, bypassing security protocols that would have taken any non-royal hours to crack. Jace covered her, standing between her and the remaining guards with his rifle in one hand and his blade in the other. The core's light flickered, the hum changed pitch, 92% charged. An alarm screamed through the chamber. The shutdown was fighting back. The weapon's automated systems were resisting, trying to complete the firing sequence. Violera pushed harder, pouring her psychic energy into the interface, overriding system after system. 95%. "It is not enough," she said through gritted teeth. "The core needs to be physically disrupted." Jace looked at the pillar of light at the center of the room. It was raw psychic energy. Touching it would kill any normal being in an instant. "Will disrupting it cause an explosion?" he asked. "Yes, a contained one. The chamber will survive. Anyone near the core will not." He set down his rifle. "Jace, no." He was already moving. He crossed the distance to the core in 4 strides, grabbed the nearest structural support with both hands, his injured shoulder screaming in protest, and drove his monomolecular blade into the base of the energy pillar. The world turned white. The explosion threw him across the chamber like a rag doll. He hit the far wall and crumpled to the floor, his body broken in ways that should have meant death. The resonance core shattered, its light dying in a cascade of fatting sparks. The hum stopped. The weapon was dead. Violera reached him in seconds. She knelt beside him, her hands pressing against wounds she could not count, her psychic abilities doing what little they could to keep his fatting consciousness from slipping away. "Stay," she whispered, "stay here." His eyes opened barely. He looked up at her face, lit by the dying glow of the ruined core. "Did it work?" he asked. "Yes, it worked. The weapon is gone." He closed his eyes. Good. The battle outside ended an hour later. With the weapon destroyed and a third of their fleet damaged, the Elvari accepted Admiral Chen's offer of ceasefire. Sovereign Malachar agreed to withdraw from the Verath system. He did not have a choice. He disowned Violera in a public broadcast that reached every corner of the galaxy. He called her a traitor, a disgrace, a daughter who had chosen animals over her own blood. He struck her name from the royal records and declared that she was no longer Elvari. Violera watched the broadcast from the medical bay of the Terran carrier Relentless, sitting beside the bed where Jace lay wrapped in regeneration fields. She watched her father's face as he spoke. She watched the golden eyes that had never held warmth for her grow colder still. When the broadcast ended, she turned it off and sat in silence. She did not cry. She had made her choice with open eyes. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Concord held an emergency session on Thalvaris Prime. Representatives from every major species attended. The topic was the Elvari's attempted use of a weapon of mass destruction against a civilian colony, a violation of Concord law so severe that even the Dominion's allies could not defend it. Violera was invited to address the assembly. She stood at the central podium, alone, wearing no royal insignia, no crystal armor, no mark of the civilization that had cast her out. She spoke in simple words, because she had learned from a human that simple words carried the most weight. She told them what she had seen in the arena. She told them about a man who let himself be stabbed through the shoulder so he could get close enough to win. She told them about a species that had nearly destroyed itself 100 times and had rebuilt every time. She told them about ships that fought until they broke apart, and crews that chose death over retreat, and a soldier who walked into a pillar of raw energy because 200,000 strangers were worth more than his own life. "We have called them primitive," she said. "We have called them fragile. We have looked at their short lives and their small bodies and their lack of gifts, and we have decided they are beneath us." She paused. "We were wrong. Humans are not strong because of what they were born with. They are strong because of what they have survived. Every scar on their skin is a lesson. Every loss they have suffered is a foundation. They do not break. They bend and they come back, and they are harder than before." She looked out at the assembled faces, hundreds of species, thousands of eyes all watching her. "My people tried to destroy them because we were afraid. We were afraid because, for the first time, we met a species that our greatest power could not touch. Not because they are immune to pain, but because they have learned to carry it. That is a strength the Ilvari have never known. It is a strength that none of us have ever known. And if we are wise, we will stop being afraid of it and start learning from it." She stepped down from the podium. The silence lasted for 10 full seconds before the applause began. On the colony world of Verath, the sun rose over green hills and silver rivers. The colonists who had been evacuated were returning. Ships landed in fields still scarred by the shadow of a war that had almost erased them. Children ran through the grass. Families rebuilt what had been abandoned in haste. Life continued, the way it always did among humans, stubbornly, imperfectly, and with more courage than anyone watching from above could quite explain. Jace Morrow sat on a hill overlooking the main settlement. He was out of the medical bay but far from healed. His right arm would never be the same. His ribs ached when he breathed. He had new scars layered over old ones, and he was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. He heard footsteps in the grass behind him, and did not need to turn around to know who it was. Violara sat down beside him. She looked different outside the cold light of warships and space stations. The sunlight caught her violet skin and made it glow. Her silver hair moved in the warm breeze. She looked, for the first time since he had known her, like someone who was not carrying the weight of a civilization on her shoulders. "The colonists are calling me Soverath," she said. "Shield of Verath. I told them it was too much." "Humans like giving people names," Jace said. "It means they have accepted you." She was quiet for a moment, watching the children play below. "I have nowhere to go," she said softly. "My people have disowned me. I have no title, no home, no place in the galaxy that will claim me." Jace looked at her. The sunlight was warm on his face. The wind smelled like grass and rain and something growing. "Welcome to being human," he said. "We never do." She looked at him. He looked at her. And for the first time, neither of them was standing on opposite sides of anything. Below them, the colony of Verath woke to a new day. The sky was wide and blue and full of light, and the people beneath it were alive, scarred, shaken, and unbroken. The way humans had always been.